Let me just rewind a little. We're talking about a process nationwide that affects 250,000 doctors, approximately 240,000. Is that the number, Peter? And the surgical voice is but one. Indeed, the college and the academy voice is one amongst many. The route into, the advisory route into helping this process get constructed and making it fit for purpose started off in 2007 when the surgical colleges and specialty associations had a pan-specialty board hosted by RCS England. And through the academy, we have made our contributions, and we've also voiced our concerns. And my presentation is going to contain some of the positives and some of the negatives that we have, I hope, reflected when we've heard them. We've been able to pass these on to the academy and to the higher echelons of planning. And I think chief amongst these, that there's two, really, and it relates to what's already been said this morning, is if this is a process, on the one hand, that's there to identify and remedy the underperforming doctor, and we don't know how many of them there are, but you've had some indication of the numbers. Out of 250,000, maybe 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 3%. But if this is a process that's designed to do something about that, is it indeed proportionate to have 98% going through something for that? So that's one question. And turning it on its head, if this is also a process that's designed to be valued by us, then it has to be valuable for us. And have we lost something about the customization, the sensitivity, and the complexity of what is our day-to-day job? Does this process of appraisal reflect that complexity? Does the machinery that's out there? So have we got the best of both worlds, or have we got the worst of both worlds? And I guess that's going to be question one. I think the other question comes to, is this working? Will it work? Well, we've just started, needless to say. If it is working, how will we know that it's working? When will we know it's working? And conversely, if it isn't, how will we know when we will? What are the proxies? What are the markers of the system as opposed to individual performance? And maybe hold that one as some of the big questions that have been articulated through the surgical groups. My talk's going to be about what contributions I think the surgical specialty associations and colleges have contributed, what supporting structures are in place to support our fellows and members, and some of the ongoing challenges around this. We were given the task of setting the bar for the standard of supporting information that is brought into the revalidation considerations. We were asked, and as Ben has just said, to define what outcomes should be presented at your revalidation appraisal, what would be appropriate, recognizing that far less within the rest of medicine, within surgery, there's a massive range in measures reflecting your own personal specialty. Indeed, even within the specialty of general surgery, I suspect there's a huge range of different outcomes that may be quality of life, mortality, complications, and what have you. How can we embrace that complexity? And that has been truly challenging, and I do not think that what we've got's right, and I would refer you to your general surgical outcomes on the website of all the colleges. And we have, for example, a 30-day mortality on multi-organ donation, and I kind of hope it's 100%. And the other thing that we have been asked to look at is identifying CPD, and you will know that the CPD, the guidance from the General Medical Council has been that they have not been prescriptive about quantity. I think as a discipline, by and large, we like to know the nature of the task, we like to know what we've got to do, and we'll do it. And I don't know how helpful it is simply to articulate principles and not actually say what is needed, but I'll come back to that, because that's a kind of simplistic approach. So, a la modern day operating theatre safety, we thought the way forward was a checklist. If we're going to need to bring stuff to the table, let's put it in a checklist, make sure we can do the tick box is if that is what you think checklists are about. I'm not sure it is. But you know that these 6 items are the foundation of revalidation, the review of your practice, quality improvement, what you do, how you do it, when it goes wrong, what others think, what your colleagues think, and some testament to that. And that's been re-articulated this last month with the latest edition of Good Medical Practice, which is now is a closer fit to the revalidation process. And without being unduly laborious about content, what we were asked to identify are what are the categories, so your general information, your personal details, scope of work, you can read what's down that left-hand side column. What are the elements that are important to populate these categories? How often are you going to need to collect them? And on the right-hand side, do the colleges and specialty associations have any suggestions on how you might go about doing that, where you might store them? And I'll come back to the surgeon's portfolio in a minute. So when it came to CPD, not just outlining the kind of categories or sections that you've seen, I'm sure, already, but also where can I get a hold of the guidance? So our checklist has hypertext links to other documents that will make your understanding of process better still. Quality improvement is a kind of nebulous term, I think. So again, we've tried to put some flesh on the bones of what does that mean for me as an individual surgeon? So what audits am I going to be required to do? If there are national audits, then you should be part of that. If there are no national audits, then you can do your own personal audit and produce that. You should be participating in M&Ms. By the way, who's recording that and who's saying whether you are and whether your contribution is actually useful, constructive, or the opposite? But there is that outcome framework again that you can refer to see if that element of your quality, and I think the suggestion about what you can bring to patient safety that Ian Finlay's just talked about is an excellent suggestion. I'm not quite sure why it's not in there. And then the thorny task of what others, collecting what others think of you, and the issues of selection bias and all that goes with that. Consistency is a concern, and again, there has been no prescribed format or tool for using multi-source feedback. There have been principles highlighted by the GMC, and perhaps some of the unfinished business for the Joint Revalidation Committee is, would there be merit in having a single tool that we all use so we know if it's working or not? The problem with the range of options is that quality assurance, I think, is going to be very tough. Just to talk a little about CPD, the CPD part of the surgeon's portfolio is hopefully becoming more streamlined. There were some initial difficulties. We hope that sitting here and now, if you have a QR reader on your smartphone, I don't know if you do or you don't, but if you do, please bring it out and please scan the QR icon. Let me know if it works. I want to leave it on the end or not. I've got one, my last slide's got that QR. But if you're able to scan it, then hopefully that smart software will put it into your iPhone. From your iPhone, you can cut and paste it into your portfolio if you use that, and from there to your appraisal. If you haven't had time to do it, don't worry, I'm going to leave up the QR code. It makes some assumptions, CPD. It makes the huge assumption that sitting here this morning, listening to this or listening to what else you've listened to in the last 3 or 4 days actually helps patients. That it is cost effective of your time and the resources. And I'm be very happy to be challenged during the panel discussion about where the evidence is that that's exactly what happens with CPD. Not to say that it isn't needed, but one of the issues is that the unit of analysis, that revalidation was the individual, and yet what we've seen in the slides this morning is that the collective benefit of individuals trying to do the same thing. And we need some balance there. So the areas of concern, to use the SASM language, the Scottish Audit of Surgical Mortality languages, have we got the balance right between complexity that reflects what we do, because our practice can be and usually often is quite complex? Will appraisal reflect that adequately? Or in an attempt to achieve consistency of 250,000 people, have we down-regulated that in a reductionist way? If it's going to be valued by us, and maybe this year or next year it will be, because it's fresh in our minds, it's still up there as a high priority. But cycle 2 won't actually finish until the year 2023. Is there going to be sustainability that will keep this going? And I suggest to you that this sustainability is dependent upon how valuable it is to us as individual surgeons. I accept the collective figures, but I think it's really got to be able to help us do our job so that patients benefit. Is the data that's collected by us or for us or about us, is it reliable enough, recognizing that we're working together in teams? The product, the outcomes that Ben's been referring to is quite often increasingly the product of multidisciplinary team input. How does that product relate to our personal responsibility, and how does that relate to our individual revalidation? One of the challenges that I think that the colleges face is that there is a potential for us to drift into becoming quasi-regulators. And I don't think that that is in anybody's interest at all. Colleges and specialty associations are there clearly for the well-being of patients. But secondly, they're there principally to support fellows and members. And yet, we have invited external reviews when people are underperforming, and it will be interesting to see as revalidation moves forward and the underperforming surgeon is identified, who's going to handle that? How will it be handled? There are words out there that this is simply us going through the hoops to comply with something that we've got no real appetite for, and it's a tick box exercise and will not help us on an individual basis. Back to this conflict of interest issue. So the medical directors are, in the main, the responsible officers. And medical directors have a formative function. They've got a formative role. They're there to help people who are not doing as well as they might to get better and clear the bar. That same person has also now got an adjudication function and will make a decision to recommend to the GMC whether they should revalidate. Is there a conflict there? Can I suggest to you that I think that colleges might also share that same conflict in specialty associations? That if we are there principally to support fellows and members, what are we doing by doing invited external reviews and making an adjudication on the competence? And I don't have the answer to that other than the fact that the well-being of patients must remain the prime consideration throughout all this. How high is the bar going to be? Ben talked about the three options that the responsible officer has. He's got the option of saying, fine, go on, continue what you're doing. We're going to recommend you retain your license to practice. Option 2 is that you haven't brought quite enough for the system to determine whether or not you can continue. Option 3, disengagement. People have simply walked away from it. That's fine. That's an easy solution. You will not keep your license to practice. What's missing, as in my first slide, is the fourth option. The fourth option that what you're doing simply isn't good enough and you have to go around again. Now, the argument is that sentinel events, adverse events, patients being harmed must not wait for a revalidation process or cycle to detect that person. And who would disagree with that? But here we've got an opportunity to scrutinize or monitor, whichever way you want to, or indeed it's a competence assurance process, to identify that everybody that's doing the job is up to scratch. And if the process of monitoring identifies someone that isn't up to scratch, then I suspect that there is a fourth option out there that is not being utilized. And I'll be interested to hear the response to that. So let me turn just to the support that the colleges have put in place to help and indeed specialty associations. So we've got now, I hope, useful and clear guidance. We've got an advisory mechanism. We've got help desks in each of the colleges, and we've provide, if you like, the briefcase for you to hold the information collective at real time. Just briefly about the surgeon's portfolio. What it ought to be able to do as you use it real time is it should be able to throw up, as you see on the right-hand side there, what you're still needing to accumulate to meet your requirement this year or indeed for the 5-year. So it's meant to be in itself a guiding document. And the early figures from usage suggest that there is some indication that it's being valued by the surgical community and being used by the surgical community. The support pathway, and that support pathway is there for fellows and members, and recognizing that appraisers are also fellows and members, and it's not a them and us process. It is about this competence assurance. And along with locality lead and framework that includes getting the requisite expertise as it relates to your specialty, then the mechanism is for inquiries suitably anonymized into the help desk, and we've got a standard format, standard review process, standard template, which anonymizes them, because you cannot make specific recommendations on a doctor to a responsible officer for fear of being seen as attempting to influence the decision. So the best way forward here is to anonymize it. And so the help desk will deal with most of the queries onto the Joint Committee of Revalidation, and we have 10 Specialty Association members there who are leads for their specialty. And if necessary, if unresolved there, then on to the Academy, and ultimately, of course, the GMC. This is, so the gun's just gone off. We've just out the blocks. The sprint started. And so the requests for information have been few and far between. But you get a sense of the kind of questions that are being asked through the help desks. So the ongoing challenges then, what are they? Equity across the surgical community, recognizing that we've got different jurisdictions, as you've heard. This compromise about customizing it for surgery, and yet that's only one small part of the healthcare sector in the United Kingdom, and trying to achieve consistency, keeping sustainability. There's the FUQs. You have to be very careful how you pronounce that term. The frequently unanswered questions, and some of them are still around the requirement for the retired surgeon, perhaps not so much in general surgery, but in orthopedics. There's a lot of retired orthopedic surgeons who do medical reports for insurance companies. Do you need to revalidate to do that? And the answer is no. You do not need a license to practice to fulfill that role at the present time. I hope I'm right in saying that. On the other hand, if you are influencing the dispersal of large amounts of money and you're there as a medical expert, how right is it, how correct is it for that authoritative voice not to be regulated by the governance process that regulates standards and quality? Are there different systems, and is it right for there to be different systems across Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland? Is there a risk of postal code revalidation? So within England even, there is no single system. As you know, we have the revalidation support team, they work in clusters, and they have not specified a requirement to do it in any one way. There are a number of different agencies, and the commissioning board, now the NHS England, is the overarching designated body. There is, of course, guidance produced by the MAG guidance, and paperwork produced by the RST. I haven't talked about a bunch of cohorts of doctors in this presentation. Time's not going to allow me to do that, but trainees, as you know, have to revalidate as well. And the system for revalidating trainees in England is going to be through COPMED, through their postgraduate deans, and they've got specific paperwork to do that over and above the ARCP process. Scotland's quite different. Scotland, there is a single system, the Scottish Online Appraisal Resource. It's computerised. It was designed fit for purpose by NHS Education Scotland. The trainees in Scotland will use this SOAR system. They will not use the COPMED regulations as it relates to England. Scotland has suggested that there will be a single multi-source feedback used by all doctors in all specialties, and it was designed fit for purpose and trialled. And it's interesting that 50% of your friends, if that's who you think you're sending it to, 50% of your friends will put in adverse stuff on the left-hand side of the curve about you. So professionalism rules. The patient questionnaire remains a vexed issue. the Welsh Revalidation Delivery Board has got a similar stance from Scotland, and they're currently procuring their own MSF, and I'm not sure where they are in Northern Ireland. I suspect they're watching us all make our mistakes and then amending. So let me wind up. Some of that sounds maybe pretty negative. What is for sure the way it used to be of getting your CCT or CCST, as it was, I suspect, with many here, at the age of 34, 35, and then practicing another 30 years, potentially unchecked, was simply not good enough. And I'm pleased that we have got now a process of competence assurance that can account within the profession and out with the profession about the abilities of the surgical community in the United Kingdom. Have we got the metric that will produce confidence that we've achieved that? I think time will tell. So thank you for your attention.